getting called to order.
So I'll call the meeting to order at 5:06 PM, and I'll ask Kate to call the roll.
Hey, Mark Prince can't make it. Kate Massandy here. James Mahoney. I put them together. Brian Mahoney.
Here.
James Manny. Chip McGarr.
Here.
Raquel is absent. Dave Palazetti. Danielle DeSimone.
Here.
Luke Murray.
Here.
Yes, we have a quorum.
All right, we're going to skip approval of meeting minutes because I did not receive any from Raquel, so I'm hopeful that by the next meeting, we'll have more minutes to be able to get approved and posted. I know Kate followed up on this recently, and it's in the works. The one thing I will ask is if you have any meeting minutes, because I know this has been a delegated task for some time, please get them over to Raquel. Hopefully, she can either get those done or it can get delegated internally to get those done and posted in short order. All right, we'll move on to any public correspondence. I haven't actually received much recently. I will post what we have this week, but really it's been fairly silent, so not much on the radar there. Chairperson's report. I'm a little foggy tonight, so just bear with me. The bond legislation we have checked in on, it is up at the House. It does have an assigned bill number, which I will send out in an update. It's moving. The biggest thing is it's got to get sponsored as it goes through committee. So we're going to follow up on this, but it's in process. That's good news. I want to let everyone know that I was notified that Raquel will no longer be serving on the committee. She's due to other obligations. Luckily, we have a town council meeting on Monday, so I was able to get action, write a memo to the council for Monday night. We're going to recommend the assignment of Brian Sylvia to join, which, as you know, this is a local budgeting official assignment from RIDE regulation, and I think he'll serve well. In honesty, most of the finances are going to end up going through the town, and Brian has done most of the lift so far on doing a lot of the calculations, as you know. So I think he'll serve well, and he volunteered and is willing and able to serve. So I expect that we'll be able to get him sworn in probably Tuesday if the council agrees, and he'll be at the next committee meeting. So we shouldn't have a break in coverage there. Any questions? No? All right. And along with that, we will have to pull votes for a new secretary. I am looking for somebody to step up, so just keep that in mind. I know this has been, again, a delegated task, but it would be very nice to have somebody doing this on a consistent basis. And if there's ways that we can make the format easier, I'm all ears, but we really do, we have to post those minutes out. We're not even a subcommittee, just to be clear. We're an assigned committee from council. We are a committee, not a subcommittee of the council or, so we're either way, we're a public body, and we fall under the same OMA regulations. I'll call for nominations next week. You'll have your chance. All right. Does anybody have any other questions on the one other thing? So there was survey work being done out on the site recently. I had received a few calls from a couple neighbors who, didn't appreciate the surveyor being out there, and he was looking for bounds and ended up kind of wandering through properties trying to do that. I did follow up with Phil, as is the sub-consultant to Studio Jade, who did it, Garofalo. I also went out to the site while the surveyors were there, spoke with the surveyor, advised him to steer clear. Unfortunately, some of those bounds are tough to get to because of fences and other things. So,
Where were they doing the surveying?
the high school. So they're doing survey at the high school and Curtis Corner, and they needed access to get to the property bounds, and some of those bounds are behind fences, along edges, etc. So my understanding, and Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, the high school's done? Yes. All right. So then they were going to go to Curtis Corner next.
They're there currently, today and tomorrow.
And luckily, there's no real neighbors, and the extent of the survey will not be moving on to any adjacent abutting private properties. So I did apologize on behalf of the committee and the town, and, it was unfortunate there was an intrusion. Lessons learned, I did express to Phil that moving forward, any testing on the site that may cause disruption, we really should notify the neighbors. So, any questions on that? All right. Moving on, we have a presentation by Studio Jade, so Phil, if you want to come on up, give us your best sales pitch. Yep. Do you have a PowerPoint? Yes. Okay.
I'm plugged in. Oh, it's on that. All right. Oh. Good? Yep. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here. We have a pretty lengthy presentation to go through, but it's got a lot of visuals, so I think it's good. A couple things that we're going to talk about is a summary of the surveys that I believe, Luke, you had advised closed today. They're still active. So there is time for people to still participate.
So on that, is there any reason we can't keep it open for another week?
Not at all.
All right. Originally, the anticipation was you may need that information in preparation for tonight, so I was trying to compel people, but we can keep it open for another week. That's no problem.
Sure, no problem at all. So I'm going to provide a summary on the data that we've received to date. And then we're going to give you a very preliminary concept design presentation. And it's important to keep in mind that this is intended to be a conversation starter. I would avoid the temptation to think it is finalized, although you will see images that make it appear that it is. This is necessary for the RIDE Stage 2. The goal of the RIDE Stage 2 is to develop a set of documents that can be estimated by a third-party group that then validates the submission, the value of the project to the school building authority. What you see today will not be the final design if you are successful in a bond vote and move this project forward. But it is important that we establish the parameters for this estimate, so that we all know what we are asking for. If you recall, in Stage 1, we identified the needs, and Stage 2 identifies the solution. Stage 3 is the actual design and documentation of that solution. So regarding the summary, or the survey, we had approximately 250 participants for each one of those survey questions. Some had a little bit more, some had a little bit less. But I was very excited to see that. Regarding the survey for the image galleries and the one for the site concepts, not only did the community participate, but there were over 150 individual comments on each one as well. So there's a lot of information that was shared, a lot of comments and concerns were expressed, and we're aggregating that and keeping that in mind as we're developing the concept design. So Regarding the image gallery, I had selected the top four. Three of them were consistent with the workshop that we conducted. These are in no particular order. But again, the goal of this survey question was to just understand what building components that the community found appealing if it were to be incorporated into the design. Obviously, this one was found to be appealing. So was this one. So was this one. And this one. So this was very helpful to us because we also knew what not to present this evening. Something that looked like this was not appealing. Neither was this. Something like this. These were the least appealing. So it gave us some parameters to work with that you will see how we responded to this evening. Now, when it comes to the site concepts, this was a much harder survey question for people to respond to, and I do appreciate them making an effort and commenting. These are the three that had the greatest variation between what was appealing and not appealing. There was no clear winner out of these 10 site concepts. But concept number 2 and concept number 8, folks found appealing because it did not have the road around the new Hazard Field. Concept number 9 was the third one that does have this loop road around Hazard Field. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit more, about some of the comments that were made. I'm going to read 6 comments. There were over 40 in this particular survey on this particular question. But this represents the range of comments that we found. This one says, I do not feel that having parking abutting the neighbors to the right of the building is a good idea. I prefer the school to be away from the road as much as possible. Maybe spread the overall building out with new concepts of the design, not just boring brick and mortar. Providing open space adjacent to the neighbors is extremely important. Should be a neighborhood feel, not urban or city-like. I prefer ample parking over aesthetics, especially if it gives us the opportunity to eliminate the need for juniors to park along the busy street. I feel that the classroom wing should be in a quiet area, not on the street. I like the outdoor eating area and entry plaza that is accessible for parent pickup and drop-off, and as much parking as possible for students and faculty. The idea was to have an open space where the current high school is, fit the new high school, and parking on School Street side. Parking spaces should take precedence over outdoor eating, which can only be utilized a few months of the year. We want any plan with outdoor eating and no playground. So this just represents a broad range of comments. As I mentioned, there were almost 40 comments to this particular question. One of the comments that I saw continuously pop up in this was that your community has thanked you, the design team and the school building committee, for giving them the opportunity to comment. And I, in return, want to thank them for taking the opportunity and time to do this. It was not easy, particularly for the ones that really responded to the site concept plans. This is a difficult design problem. They recognize that, and I do appreciate their effort in assisting the project. So this is not meant to be an eye test. You're going to see 3 floor plans. This is a 3-story concept that we're presenting, and we're going to highlight these areas as we go through. This is our initial concept for the new South Kingstown High School, 725 students between right now between 140 to 145,000, and we want to try to fit 800-seat auditorium here. So we're going to break this down into major pieces. Don't try to figure everything out. Please don't try to read the names of all the rooms. It's in response to a program that we're working on with CHIP that we started several months ago and will continue to develop. And again, this is not the final design. It's intended to put this project into a box that professionals can estimate and the school building authority can validate. So this is the first floor of the building. We're going to relate it back to the site in a minute. I just want you to focus on the spaces of the building. The first thing we want to identify and make clear to you is that we understand the importance of circulation within the building. It wants to be simple and clean. The way this building is oriented is that there's clear circulation points from the front to the back. That runs from the west to the east and also from the north to the south. In the renderings, you're going to see we're able to identify entrances as north, entrances as south. And then the academic core, having a very simple circulation path around the classrooms in the lower left-hand corner. So this is, in general, the circulation of the building, which is much different than what you have today. So let's start in the upper left-hand corner, the administrative core, the nurses' suite. It should be in a point of entry and have prominence within the site and the building. Off that administrative core, at the entrance, would be the student commons, the student cafeteria, the grand hall, the main space. We want to create a very efficient building, so we don't want to create a series of rooms. We want to use all the space as possible. So as you enter into the South Kingstown High School, you could see that where this green area is a two-story volume that has student common space, or it serves as overflow or gathering space. Off of that is a considerable amount of space that needs to service the infrastructure, the kitchen, and all the services provided to a building of about 725 students. Next is the athletics and the gym, locker rooms. It's important for you to see how big that area is compared to others. It is a considerable part of the square footage. Similarly, the auditorium and the arts and music. Those spaces should be along primary routes of circulation. So too CTE, large CTE spaces, noisy and dusty CTE spaces such as construction, where they want to have higher ceilings. They want to have direct access to the exterior. This is certainly not intended to separate students who take CTE courses, but there is a functional need to specifically locate them at certain areas within the building. You will see that we have other CTE spaces spread throughout the building. Off of that two-story student commons area, we could have a very nice monumental grand stair that leads to the upper floors of the academic wing. That's what you see in this little red block that just appeared. The gray is the academic core, the classrooms as they start wrapping around the building. That light purple space is small group rooms, maybe some flexible learning spaces that we want to incorporate into the academic cores. Lastly, on the first floor is the art component, adjacent to the auditorium and the music and the other arts, able to get outside, etc. Now, you don't have to understand this in its entirety. This design and this floor plan will push and pull for a considerable amount of time. Yes?
Question about the athletic space where you have the changing rooms and whatnot. Does that look any different than well, how it looks today and or 20, 30 years ago? Like a lot of our kids, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like they don't necessarily, I know we have to have locker rooms for the athletic teams, but for like the PE students, they're not making use of the locker rooms as much, from my understanding. Is that area like reimagined for like the 21st century also, or is it pretty much standard as we can envision it from when we were in school?
So typically in these locker rooms, what has been removed is the quantity of showers. And in each locker room now, we only have 3, boys and girls. I can tell you that this whole athletic locker room piece requires a lot of conversations with the athletic director, the teams that you have, the sports that you have, equity, Title IX, everything. This area is very similar to a high school we did about a year ago. So that was our starting point. We have not engaged with the athletic director to the point where we could fine-tune this any more than this. But we know this would satisfy a 725-student high school. The second floor, we did the same thing. We have a very clear circulation path at the second floor. We do think there's value in providing administrative support on the second floor as well. This could be our guidance suite, adjacent to the media center. Again, the media center having a prominent position in the building and on the site. Incorporating CTE spaces that would be appropriate to be adjacent to a media center. Again, another large athletic component to this, which could house an auxiliary gym for wrestling, fitness area, a walkable track within the gymnasium. Obviously, the middle and the space is open to below for basketball and volleyball, etc. There is a second floor component to the auditorium to fit the number of seats that you're looking for. We would have a section of stadium seating, which means that you would discharge at the top of that seating onto the second floor. We've identified this area in the middle here for special education right now as a placeholder for that program. Similar to the first floor, this red block identifies that monumental stair that's linking that 2-story student commons area to the second floor of the building. On the second floor, we have more flexible student learning spaces. And again, we've stacked the classrooms over top of the first floor, making that about as efficient as you could get. The third floor, I've kept it located in the same spot for the first and second floor. And on the third floor, again, very simple circulation. Breakout spaces, flexible learning spaces, classrooms, and we've identified the science labs on the third floor because of exhaust and providing utilities to it. So we walked through those floor plans very quickly. Not everybody understands how to read floor plans, and that's fine. So I've gathered some representational images of the spaces that I just talked about so that you can sort of get an idea of what we're talking about. For example, the entrance to the new high school. It should have a lot of transparency, letting light in. It's where the office is located. When you come through that entrance, these are all from various schools across the world, so they're not meant to go together. But as you come through that entrance, this is sort of the student common space, a 2-story space where the cafeteria would be. Off of that is a monumental stair to the second floor that's off the student commons. Your classrooms, we're going to have a lot of discussions. What should be the furniture in those classrooms, right? The furniture, the classrooms with the right furniture, those classrooms can be a little smaller because you have the right furniture. So you'll have classrooms that will have to discuss what's the right type of furniture. There'll be breakout spaces that we talked about. They should be transparent so you could see what's happening in there. If there's a couple students that need to go in, work as a team. Art's going to look different than it does now. We want flexible spaces for the arts. Gymnasium with a walking track around the perimeter. An auditorium that has seating at the lower end and then stadium seating in the back. Music wants to have higher ceilings so the acoustics can be appropriate. CTE spaces, again, higher ceilings so we can have the equipment that we need in there to construct. Again, CTE. The media center on the second floor, looking out, a lot of glass, a lot of flexible furniture, less books than what we've been exposed to. Again, classrooms will want to look at furniture, right? What's the right style? What's the right fit? Again, flexible meeting spaces again on the second floor. That second floor area around the gym for fitness. Again, from the auditorium, from the bleacher, from the stadium seating down to the stage. Science labs. Science labs are going to look different than what they look like today. Again, in order for this building to be as efficient as possible, these rooms need to be flexible. Classrooms need to be flexible. Science labs needs to be flexible. Art needs to be flexible, etc. That's the only way we're going to be able to control the square footage and give you the building that satisfies the program. So I want to present a series of renderings of this initial concept. We'll start with, basically there is probably a dozen images that take you through the site so that you could experience the outside of the building. Concept that we've started with does include a loop road around Hazard Field. And the first image that we will start with after the site plan will be, if you can see my cursor, from back here, upper left-hand corner. This is not necessarily the site plan. I'm just using this as an example. But we're going to start back here, and we're going to work our way around the building. This is just a close-up version of the site that actually where the building is. I focused in just on this because if you did the whole site, you're not going to see anything. What I just want you to see here is I want you to understand how big this building is, how it fits on the site, how we're going to integrate parking, how we can address hardscapes and softscapes as you approach the building and around the building. So let's begin. So this is an image, as I mentioned, starting in the corner of the site, and as we're approaching the building, I think it's important to keep in mind that everybody realizes that the new Hazard Field will be likely plateaued. There'll be a lower field and an upper field. Now we're recently doing our surveys, so we'll be able to fine-tune that. But I think at worst case, you have two levels, a low field and an upper field. So as we're approaching the building, the entrance that you see here is the same location as the current exit from the high school between the building and the Hazard building. When you come out of the cafeteria and you go down, that is that location right there. So as we approach the building, we try to use materials and textures that we would find in South Kingstown, something that would be elegant, but used responsibly. Chip, one of the things you had mentioned was to make sure people could identify the entrance to the school. There's a lot of techniques to do that. This is the main entrance to the school right here. The spaces that we talked about previously to the left would be the administration. On the second floor is guidance and media. To the right is the academic core. When we look at the site plan, you'll see there's a number of opportunities for drop-off and pickup. When we institute drop-off and pickup, we want to make sure it's done safely. We want to protect, obviously, all the students and staff, also protect the building. There's techniques that we can use to make sure that that's done, such as these bollards and planters. This is the other side on School Street. Again, the red brick is the academic core, and then to the left was the main entrance where the flags are. We did want you to know that we recognize there is probably more of these, but we wanted to at least let you know that we can pick up one. You'll see some unique brick detailing. We think that that's a nice feature to put on the front of the building. It's something that I think speaks to South Kingstown. But it's a little innovative, but it needs to be done, we think, done responsibly. You could do something like that. As we're coming down School Street, we think it's important to celebrate the arts and identify that south entrance that goes into that large volume, which is the auditorium. Coming up School Street, this is another entrance into the, and I don't want to call it the back of the building. It is another face to the building. This happens to be the east side of the building. But we'll certainly want to get access into this area. And we start breaking down the mass of the building. To the right, in those large overhead doors, is the CTE program. You see above that roof screening that we think would be important to hide mechanical units. And then the volume that you see with the windows is the gymnasium that rises. And the mass to the left is the auditorium. This image was purposefully done this way because with this suggested level of planting that we would put across this back part, it's unlikely that you would see too much of the building, but if you did, this is the view from Hazard Field, your most farthest point, your existing Hazard Field. This is coming down the loop road. This is where we've identified right now the chevron parking for the buses. So it's ride regulation that the high schools provide chevron parking for buses for pickup and discharge of students. You can seek a waiver, but somewhere on this site, you will still have to stack at a minimum 11 buses, maybe more. If you strategically locate chevron parking, this large flat area can be used for some school programming, band practice, ROTC activities, or more event parking for either the school or the fields. This is the elevation you see. The word Rebels is etched in windows that are into the gymnasium. This is what we've identified as the north entrance, if you remember that circulation that ran across the building from south to north. So the student dining outdoors, we know that that is an important feature. We've identified a location for that. It is right outside of the kitchen and the administration area. You see that we've identified an area for tables there behind the planters and the benches. This is also a space that can serve pickup and drop off. In the upper right-hand corner would be your media center, as well as your CTE and classroom spaces across the top. The lower right-hand corner is administration. And this is the final image of our concept. I think this picture pretty much captures the intent that we tried to provide after experiencing a lot of good work with you all and the feedback that we received in the surveys. So that concludes the presentation. And again, this is a conversation starter. We will need to produce a significant amount of documentation to have this project estimated for our RIDE Stage 2 submission. And as I mentioned, this is not the final design, but it's important that you understand the direction we're heading, and if we need to pivot, then we should have that discussion. That's all I have, Luke.
Great, thanks, Phil. So as you said, this is a conversation starter. Why don't we, if you could go back to the floor plans?
Sure.
I think we'll just kind of reel back. And the reason I wanted you to get through your whole presentation, I realize that architecture needs to be done in context of the site and everything else, so I think it's important you showed all the images first before people respond. So with that, I'll open it up to the committee and then I'll open it up to the public for any questions. Does anybody have any specific questions before you get to comments, clarifying on any of the design stuff? Nothing from the committee? All right, are there any clarifying questions that the public has they want to ask of Phil? Feel free. Doral, you'd raise your hand at one point. Did your question get answered? Okay, all right, so.
Of the renderings of the site? Okay. All right.
No, we're not seeing jerk monitor showing something?
Let's. So I'm presenting full screen on my laptop.
Full screen for us.
Yeah. I mean, I can. Okay, it's back there.
Right? Guess I missed my call. Turn it off, turn it back on.
Reboot.
Learned a lot.
Correct. Yes, yes. And this is the existing hazard building, right here.
Yeah, why don't we, yeah, just repeat, so for the benefit of the public who's watching.
I think I heard you say, why are we orienting the building to the main entrance to Hazard instead of School Street? We had a number of concepts that did orient to School Street in those original concepts. But as we've continued to refine this project, and again, a lot more refinement needs to happen, there's a lot of things that we wanted to at least keep in the back of our mind. It is very difficult for this building to have a back, right, a rear. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to go to the rear of a high school, it's not pleasant. There's a lot of infrastructure and services that need to support a building of this size. Trash, generators, transformers, chillers, all of those things need to be somewhere on the site. We're sensitive to where they get placed. Those services are directly related to the function that's inside the building. And where those functions are placed on the inside dictate where things go on the outside. And keeping in mind here, we think right now you're about over 300 spaces of parking. Chip, do you know how many parking spaces you have exactly? I think I came up with like 325, maybe three.
I think that's approximately correct.
So, and in this plan, we've only been able to come up with about 275. So we're already reducing the amount of parking. We saw comments for parking and against parking. When we put all of those things together, one of the better design solutions was to have the entrance facing Columbia. Here's where I'd want to say, trust me, but I'm not. But, as we work through this and we start pushing and pulling pieces, knowing that we have major spaces like the gym and the auditorium that prefer direct access, that we want multiple points for traffic. When you start putting all of those pieces together, if we were to move the admin to School Street, we potentially run the risk of exposing a lot more services along School Street that we really didn't want to do.
Are there other questions?
That was part of our plan, yes. Correct. When I say the word admin, I mean the high school administration, principals, assistant principals. Sure. As Luke had mentioned, we just finished the survey of the property. The images that you see here, we've generated from either maps that we've been able to retrieve or Google Earth. So there's a lot more specificity that's coming with this. And when our site civil engineers are involved in this solution will look different and maybe increase parking. May decrease parking. I don't think it'll decrease. I think it'll increase. But in this particular plan, we have less parking than what you have now.
If I don't mind speaking to that, there are a couple things. Number one, again, to reiterate, these are preliminary concepts intended to start the conversation and not be a final design, number one. And number two, when it comes to parking, if I'm not mistaken, the senior parking is not maxed by any stretch of the imagination. And with declining enrollment, it's not a huge, there's ample parking availability. As someone who comes in and out of the high school pretty regularly, there's places to park pretty regularly.
Well, I could say, for example, we had upwards of 60 college reps coming for our college fair. So we had to take all of the spots off of Columbia Street away for a school day. And while it was tight, no one was complaining about it. It was more, I think there was more concern before the event than when the event was actually going on. So there's definitely space. And the other thing too that you have to realize that some of what we're calling those 325 spaces are definitely not ideal parking spaces for current cars. So if you're saying 275 spaces, my guess is that those spaces are more what you'd want for parking spaces. So the actual parking amount of land may be very similar without really realizing it, because some of those spots are really meant for compact cars.
Phil, can I ask you a question here? When it comes to, so I've expressed this to Phil already, but, so I guess it's a loaded question, but the Chevron parking, which is a ride regulation, in my view, having done these designs, is a waste of space. And I pointed out North Kingstown High School, they were actually required to do it, and it lasted about a year, and then they restriped it and made it a parking lot. What's the chances of getting a waiver, given the fact that we're already underparked? It is a tight site. Have you experienced where they've given that waiver, or?
Yeah, certainly in an urban setting, the waiver is much easier to achieve. Here, because we're trying to relocate a large open space, and some of the constraints of this particular site in building here while we're remaining operational, I would say you have a very good argument to ask to receive a waiver on the Chevron parking. But we still need to find somewhere to stack 11 buses.
It's much easier to stack them in a line with a one-way flow of traffic, because I look at that long linear line of parking, and with a slight bump, it's inefficient in my mind, because I think you can always double stack parking, right? Another 18 feet gets you probably 50 spaces. But you could also widen the drive aisle, separate it, and have a bus drop-off. Kind of like what's existing today. It's not as long, but there's a separate drive aisle that's for the bus drop-off from the parking area. So I just think there's opportunities here that if we get away from the Chevron, we can expand parking while also creating maybe a better flow of traffic. So, my thoughts.
Well, I'm sure there's a reason why there's Chevron parking, and I
You're gonna
venture to
laugh
guess.
at the reason.
Well, it's got to be safety. You don't want buses backing up. I mean, so,
It's exhaust next to the school.
well, exhaust is a safety issue too. You don't want that going in the school, but you don't want buses backing up. So if they can pull in on a Chevron parking pattern and pull out, that's a safety issue, but I guess we'll have to see.
The interesting thing is, you drop them off, they have to travel across the parking lot to get into school. If you drop them at the curb, you drop them on a sidewalk, they go directly into the door. So from a safety aspect, it's kind of, I've had this debate with,
Suppose you have 11 buses,
Yeah.
5 buses pulling in at once, and they're all stacked up, where,
well, usually they just stack along the curb and they just drop,
Nose to tail, nose to tail.
yeah, nose to tail, and then they go one way out. Yeah.
I keep thinking of
Well,
Broad Rock.
As long as you don't double park, I'm not talking double parking the buses, if you go in a single line.
Yeah, I don't want to get sucked into the bus drop-off part right now at this early stage, but I do want to point out that our buses arrive, they're all on campus at the same time, and that has to do with safety in the building. You need supervision for students. You can't just launch hundreds of kids into your building with no supervision. So while, yeah, sure, bus pulls up, drops kids off, bus pulls up, drops kids off, makes sense. That's probably not realistic, because we're on the early side of the bus run, and as a result, it's like they're there. And so when the doors open, the kids all spill out at once. So it's not as simple as just a couple of buses pulling up and then the kids exit and then more come in. So just something to keep in mind with that. And ultimately, I think the parking situation will work itself out as we move through this.
Do we have other questions?
So well, no, they could be two ways. They're wide enough we have drawn them in this plan wide enough to be two ways. And that's what I'm saying, now that the survey is complete and the site civil engineer can take a look at some concepts and some feedback. Well, this is a design. We need a little bit more of an engineered solution. So the question was, the original question from the previous speaker was, how wide are the roads? Current question is the purpose of the loop road around Hazard Field. And in our original concept right here, we have only anticipated that that loop road was for buses, really for bus entry into the site. Buses would enter into the site, stack in that Chevron parking, then discharge out onto School Street. That was the intent. As this design progresses, there's going to be a lot more discussions with DPW, with fire, with police. There may be strategic reasons to have this additional access point. In fact, we're doing, will be doing work at Broad Rock to address emergency access, et cetera. So the comment about it being a racetrack, that right now doesn't concern us because it's not very, once you get to the end of that, you have to navigate left or right and go around the building, et cetera. That does not seem to be any easier than to just simply go down School Street and to make a right on Columbia, or vice versa. There's no light at that intersection that gets backed up with traffic. That usually what promotes people to look for a shortcut. And again, this is just very high-level concept.
I think the larger point is we have to get it right. One of the number one failures of these school designs, and this isn't just our community, as we've had growing pains, but I've seen it across other communities. They try to they focus so much on the school, they fail to look at site circulation, both pedestrian and vehicular. And so there's not only safety hazards, but you just can't get people in and out because it's chaos for about 20 minutes a day, or a couple times a day, and maybe a nighttime event and a morning event. But, everything comes in one glut, and you got to get people in and out fast. So however we can do that. Other questions regarding the design so far? Can you go back to the floor plan? First floor?
I'll unplug again to get it back up on the screen, because apparently that's what's doing
You're
it.
IT savvy, Phil.
Yeah.
There you go.
Do you want the colors on it, or?
No, not really. I just had just a couple of questions. One of the things that I've seen, and I only know my limited experience. I've probably been to 4 or 5 different high schools, but almost everyone is designed so everyone spills out into a main corridor, and it's always too tight. So typically you'll have parents with food, they're selling shirts, there's a show going on, the kids spill out. And so one of the things is the interaction, but they never seem to place them next to the cafeteria or a common space. So this is close, My question is, can we get it closer so that that gathering area is when everyone spills out of the auditorium, there's a big common area, that linkage is more concrete, I guess, in my mind. 'Cause I just see that as a pain point, having, been to some of these shows where you come out and you're kind of in a glut, and nobody can get in and out. And I actually, I've been to a couple events here, it's the same way. You come out, and if you have any food or any vendors or anything, you're stuck in a crowd, and the best thing you can do is try to get out of there. So that's one comment I have. And the other one is just, it's really the outdoor dining, and I know there's a grade difference. But I guess in my mind, I think if you go back to the site plan,
Let me do it this way.
sorry to make you.
No, you're
hard
fine.
here.
Let me just do it this way.
I think it's an important visual. I don't know why that's,
I don't know, but it works. So we got to work
hit it
around.
twice, knock it on. Between the Hazard Building, and this is kind of what if you go out there now and you kind of think of the missed opportunities of the site, you got that roadway that cuts between the Hazard Building and the high school. And I feel like we're making the same mistake here by cutting it off with a parking lot. If you pictured that parking lot between Hazard and the school as a kind of a quad court area that had outdoor dining and kind of a nice open space, picture it as like a sculpture garden, artwork could be incorporated into there, and create a real linkage architecturally between those two buildings. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to have the kids come out at that level? And is there a way, you have a grand staircase, to get them out at that level so they could have an upper and lower eating experience? Maybe there's, a cantilevered overlook or something onto the grade below. If we can reduce the chevron and look at an alternative there, that might expand the parking and offset that so we could get that green space back. I just see that as kind of a missed interaction between the outdoor space. My thoughts only, but. Or even the auditorium, if the auditorium had a linkage, you have the auditorium, you have the commons, then you have that outdoor space. So now you picture it on a nice night, that courtyard could be an extension of that total space at that second and first level for a big event. Just a thought. And I'm not saying my ideas are preeminent here. Anyone's welcome to say they don't like it or agree or disagree. So it's like whatever.
I think, so I think one of the things that would need to be determined is what is the main purpose of the Hazard Building. So if it's going to largely be used for professional development and central administration, then I'm not recommending one or the other. I'm saying if that's the case, then I don't like that idea, because they're going to need to, if there's teachers that are going for professional development, they're going to need separate parking away from the school. They're not going to want to be mixing with our traffic. You'd have to look at central administration having, like, even at busy times for us, having an ability to get in and out pretty easily. If you're going to house some of our programming there, then yes, that tying it closer does make a lot of sense. So I think that ultimately, like right now, our 18 to 22-year-old program is housed in there. There's some absolute benefits to that, and for us to consider keeping that going forward, because they are not, like, they're operating on a different schedule. And so if you're going to have more programming in there, then 100%, I agree with that idea, like how do we tie them closer? But if you're going to have largely separate functions for those buildings, sharing the site is absolutely a good idea, but I'm not sure you want to tie them as much. Not aesthetically in terms of the looks, but rather in terms of the function. I'm not sure you want to do that if that's the case.
Well, go ahead.
Say what Chip was saying is if administration is in there, that he'd like a moat in between the.
Parking is preeminent, right? You got to put parking under the building with an elevator going to the first level. We get it.
Something about a commuter
right.
lot, and then,
Want
yeah.
as close as possible, designated placard. Phil, along those lines, we haven't discussed, because we're so wrapped up in getting kind of a budget for the high school, But there's this dangling piece of the administration, which I guess is dependent on where we come in on numbers to see what we can afford on programming for the hazard. Is that correct?
Well, yes, and that translates into how we will be developing the site at CCMS. Because that's where central office is now, in that building.
Right. Which it matters whether that building stays or goes as far as site program.
Correct.
So we need to kind of figure out where the program needs to be to determine if that really has to go or we can work around it.
Correct, and that's our next lift, is CCMS. I don't have anything to speak to tonight for CCMS.
So I look at things a little different than most people. I'm always looking at the safety end of things. One of the lessons learned, unfortunately, in a lot of these school shootings is how many entrances and exits you have out of the parking lots, and where was that school situated to get the kids out, and God forbid there was a mass casualty. So if you look at some of those, especially with the entrances, that's like a choke point times 10. So you definitely need an entrance on one side and an exit on the other. Emergency vehicles, even if it's something, a couple of rescues came, whatever, you just need a way in and a way out so that they're not trying to get in and out of the same entrance or exit. So I think that needs to be a consideration. I don't have the answer right now. I mean, maybe sit with the chief and look at the way the building's situated, the way the parking lots are situated. But
Jim, are you talking about where Hazard is, where it's blocked?
Yes.
Outside? Yeah. It should be.
you definitely need an entrance and an exit. So in Newtown, Connecticut, there was so many emergency vehicles, they couldn't get, you had police officers running a half a mile to get to the school, and all the rescues were stuck in their lots.
Dora?
So that really becomes an operational decision. If there is a pre-function, that cafeteria, student commons area is a great space for pre-function. As you go through, and then whether it's an auditorium activity or a gymnasium activity, then you are ticketed or not. But we did provide in that cross corridor, we'll call it, entrances on the north and south side, which can specifically serve functions either at the gym or at the auditorium, or both. Correct.
Back in the day before that auditorium was there, that was the gym entrance.
Okay.
There was a little lobby. I haven't been on that side. I don't know if the lobby is still there or not. I think it's the girls' changing room now. Yeah, so that used to be the lobby, and that was where we entered in order to go into the gymnasium. It's just been configured since the auditorium has been put on.
Any other questions, comments?
The existing grades where the high school is now is pretty significant between Columbia and when you get to the back parking lot. So to provide two large functional field areas, preliminarily, we think it's plateaued, meaning there's a higher field and a lower field, and that transition could be done with just grading. I don't know that for certain. It's just our instinct based on seeing what we see currently. You certainly could excavate all out, put a retaining wall across one side, and have the entire field level. But these are value judgments and decisions that will have to be made in terms of costs and efficiencies, et cetera.
And Phil, Garofalo, once they get the survey turned around, they're also the site engineer.
Yes.
We'll be doing some grading work.
Correct.
We can look at different field options,
Correct.
right? Because, I mean, it may be retaining walls, it might also be steeper slopes, plateaus, things like that. So we'll have to look at that as a separate
Mm-hmm.
option. Good. You know, I think a few, just to summarize what we've heard so far, so there's some questions. I mean, safety is definitely priority. You have kind of a T-circulation design. I guess I kind of share, like, the entranceway being on that side. I guess I just don't want to make the same mistakes of the past. Like, it's got to be very definitive on where that main entry is, and but also have enough ins and outs to be safe. So, I mean, I like the sketches. They look nice. But I'm sure the sketches of that one over there looked nice on the renovation options when they did it. And then, you know, you end up with what you got today. So it wasn't intended to be so, it just, you know, best of plans. We're gonna maybe do some probing on the chevron, or whether we do, and maybe some design options on that. Could we just look at that?
Yep.
We got to get some more clarity, I guess, before we can get to the hazard building. And that's going to come with Curtis Corner development and funding scenarios. So, anything else?
The last thing I have to say about the entrance is that actually, I like the entrance, the main entrance where it's situated right now from a safety perspective, because when you walk into that building, when you walk in, if that's that common space and the cafeteria space, that's like you're walking right into our student body, right? And so to me, I would not want that facing like on a street, or I liked having it almost protected. Yes, I agree with what Jim was saying. There should be maybe be able to get through where these benches are. But I like having, if as we walk in, we're walking in, if it's lunchtime and I'm walking in those front doors, and yes, they're secured and they're up to 21st century safety standards, no doubt, but that's our student body there. So I prefer having it not facing a road.
Fair enough. Did you get a lot of responses on the face of the building, or any verbiage from the public on references, or?
I think they felt that completing the survey with the images sort of satisfied that. For example, if they selected images that appealed to them, that they didn't have to comment on, are you talking about the materiality of the building, or?
No, I'm just, you know, I want it to face School Street, or I'd rather have it.
So, well, there were a couple outliers, such as we should refurbish what we have. It should be at CCMS. There was a comment that said it should face School Street. But there was I didn't see any pattern.
I also, just anecdotally and just opinion, I love how you have the arrowhead, the anchor, and the rebels were all incorporated. It just is a nod to the heritage of our community, and if that's something that we can actually pull off. In reality, I think it's really cool, so I appreciate you throwing that in there.
I mean, you've done a lot of work here. I mean, probably well more than I think we expected. So I guess my ask is to allow the public to additionally weigh in on this. So we have a survey link on our webpage. Could we put this up we can free flow comments. We don't have, I mean, we can
Sure.
have like, dislike, or meh, or whatever, and then give us comments on this design, because this is very different, because you didn't incorporate the circulation around the fields on this one.
Yes.
It's kind of a hybrid option of what you showed us.
So,
Doable?
yes, I can turn this into a survey that has essay response capabilities, that people can comment.
And then I can put a link right to this video, your presentation. I can even shorten it. So that'll just, if they want to watch the presentation before they comment, they can do that as well. And that might be helpful. Does everyone,
I have a question. It is, because this was kind of like it said, like it's not a final design, it's a start conversation. Are there going to be, do you have other iterations that you'll be floating by us? And because I asked this and I make that point because the minute this goes out, and it's already going to happen because we've already, that part of the conversation's already started, this is going to be the new school. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, I'm just cautionary.
the big
Conversations
disclaimer at the
around
top is going to be, this is not
Okay,
final,
like
but
stamp draft
Right.
across it, I don't care, but I'm just saying, if there's going to be more iterations, I would rather multiple choices be demonstrated versus this gets put out, and then all of a sudden, this is the school, and then people go away for summer vacation and come back and go, that's not the school. So it's cautionary. I'm not, like I said, I'm happy to support what everybody feels is proper. I just am gun shy.
Phil, what would be best for you to solicit feedback? I know there's two ways. One, you throw out multiple options and you say, which one do you like? Another one is take it one bite at a time as people kind of whittle a concept down, and then you go to the next iteration. What's best for you?
So that process, both of those processes work well when you are actually designing the project, which is like a year-long effort. We're trying to condense this now into like weeks so that we can develop the documents, get the estimate.
Yeah, so
This is for the stage
Phil,
two.
I'm going to give you an off-ramp, because that's what I was going to say. I'm like, I think it looked to me like we have a solid concept that meets the programming standards. I'm assuming you have enough classroom space, enough teacher prep space and things like that, the CTE spaces. You seem to have worked the whole program. And you've got good solid finishes. I think the only thing I'd add maybe is one of the renderings should show the hazard building to show how the architecture looks together, which there were a couple of snippets that looked solid, but it was just a little snippet, so maybe a little something closer. But me personally, at this stage of this project, and how important it is that we get a good cost estimate and get started on cost estimating, if this meets a program like this, I would be pushing it towards cost estimating and allowing people to comment on it so that when we do get into design, we have that feedback. We want the feedback, but I wouldn't want to spend 2 weeks tweaking this when we're going to spend a year tweaking this. Let's just get this to cost estimating, because we might come back and find out we are so far out of budget, we are wasting our own time and have to do a whole value engineer, and then all that little tweaking really is rearranging the chairs on the Titanic, which I don't think we are. I trust your cost estimating, but I would just say it's solid, it meets program. I think it looks awesome, did a lot of work on it. Push it to cost estimating.
That would be my preference if we want to hit the June 30th deadline.
Personally, I appreciate the off-ramp, because my feeling is, and listen, we all know this is likely to change, but the programming elements won't. So whether that chair, whether that desk, a chair, or the brick facade, or wherever it is placed here or there, is not going to matter from a cost standpoint. So I 100% agree, because until we get cost, we can't determine how much money we have to spend in other places, which is also critical to the decision-making process. So in the interest of walking and chewing gum, the only thing I would say is for the public to continue to weigh in, because at some point, we're also going to have visuals to show out there for the bond, right? We want to be honest with the public of approximate what we're going to deliver. So I do think we need to continue on with some iteration and development, but personally, and I can't speak for the group, but we'll put it out there if everyone's fine, is to go ahead and kick this to estimating to get the estimate done. At the same time, continue to get comments and input and refine a little bit more, so that way we have a little bit more polished product to move forward towards the bond vote. Does that sound reasonable? Is that good for
To be
you?
clear, I'm not 100% on the design, that this isn't what it's going to look like. I don't want anybody to think that we're pushing this through because we're trying to fast track it. No, we're just trying to get good numbers
Yeah.
to budget. The school will look different from that, although I'm pretty impressed with how it looks.
And I imagine it's going to be similar to Curtis Corner, a football field, synthetic turf, whether it goes this way or that way, estimating-wise is not going to matter. I mean, grading may, but, so I think we can advance that one. I mean, once you kind of get on top of that one and we take a quick look, I don't think we need to delay that one. We can continue to refine and tweak. Sound fair?
Yes, yeah.
Anybody have any thoughts?
I'm gonna go
Yep,
right back in the opposite direction, just because of the hat I wear for the district.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only thing I was gonna ask Phil, if you can look at the design, and if you go where the student cafe is, that long run from the Hazard Building, student cafe to the back of the building, how many buses you could get from corner of the building there to the road? Because I look at it as the bus opens up on the right side, gets the kids right to the front door, safety, right in the building, and we could potentially fit 11, 12 buses right along that stretch. They take one right and they're out on School Street. So that's it. That's all I got.
I actually ran it. It's 15 buses.
It's 15 buses. Is that how many I can fit, or?
From Columbia Street interior up to the, probably mid two-thirds of the school, you can run 15 buses. It's pretty good. Yeah, basically coming up that way. so
Putting the
that-
buses right here.
Yeah, they just basically pull up to the curb and drop. So basically just
No, the benches could stay, the bus would just,
sidewalk.
this concept sort of represents this as being parent drop-off. So you maybe put
What you do
parent
is
drop-off on the other side.
You just do timing. You say no drop-off till the buses
Buses
leave. So you
discharge.
set a time and parents learn pretty quick.
All right, I would say I agree with this idea that we got to go to the cost estimate. All these things can be worked out, is what I'm hearing. We'll have a year to do that. And what I would say, though, is hopefully ending it on a positive note so we can move to the next agenda item at 6:23 p.m. What I was going to say was, Phil, the big thing that I had asked you with it was making sure on the interior that for an administrator I can get anywhere in the building very quickly, and you definitely heard that. So that I can be anywhere in that theoretical building very quickly, and that's much appreciated.
Okay. So we're all in agreement, move to cost estimating, we'll continue to refine. I will ask the committee, and you all have your different technical expertise, right? You already work in the building and what the school system is, and obviously construction background. Continue to think about this from that aspect, especially from maintenance, things like that as you go forward and thinking about take a better look at the design. This is the first time we've seen the floor plan, and just if there's things that are come up to the top now, we'll have time, but it's always good to raise the questions early. All right. Anything else on this? Bill, you good?
Good,
All right.
thank you.
We'll move on. All right, so I have a review and discussion of the OPM RFQ review and selection process. So, Phil, thank you for sending over the updated RFQ. Just so everyone knows, I reached out to Mark and the school department to determine how we were going to approach this from a procurement aspect, because it could be done by either the town administration or school side. Mark indicated he wanted to keep it on the school side, so they're working on it. I sent an email over to Raquel. They're down on staff, so she's handling it, so it's a little bit delayed. But she's working on it, and I anticipate it'll be issued out soon. But it hasn't been put to market yet. But I did send her an email with what the committee decided, that we're going to ship it out to the 30 on the MPA list, and that try to keep it to a reasonably short time duration for turnaround. So I'll get another update on that in the coming week and report back out to the committee. Does anybody have any questions on that? All right, then we'll move on. review and discussion regarding participation in 300th anniversary parade. I put this on because I had submitted the application for participation in the parade. The idea is that by that point, we will have kind of a more refined image to put on a float or whatnot. I haven't received anything back from the 300th. I will touch base with Terry Murphy and Joanne Esposito to see if there's steps that need to be taken. But we will need, I'm just preparing everybody, right? This is, going to be a little bit of a lift. I've got to get some coordination together to get a float, to get the images and figure this out. So I'm going to put this on for future agendas. This was just the red flag of like June is coming. And we need to start thinking about this. So we'll have a little deeper dive on this once we tonight's priority was really about Phil and getting through this. But this is going to come up in a couple weeks, and I just want you to be prepared. But if you have any ideas on how that maybe should be set up, now that you're seeing some images and getting maybe a little bit inspired on what should be done, and Chip, coming from the school aspect, is there anything you think that would inspire? And we're looking to get people excited, and I think that's the goal, right? And show them what this could be. So just let me know if you have any ideas. Any questions, concerns, comments? Okay. What are you doing over there, Jim? His phone's going haywire. All right, discussion and outreach regarding public communication activities and establishment of public outreach. So we've talked about this. I think it's just trying to get our hands wrapped around the public outreach aspect. Right now, I'm so engrossed in more of the design aspect that I think that's sort of the focus for the next few more weeks. I did put the survey link on the website, so that at least went up. As you can see, we got a really good response. Overall, I know 250 doesn't sound like a lot, but I would say for a community to respond with 250, that's actually pretty good. Usually you get 20, 30 if you're lucky. So it shows that people are starting to get engaged and they at least feel like their voice is being heard. We can see tonight, it was heard. Phil took a lot of those comments and incorporated them into the refined design he showed tonight. So if anybody's listening, I encourage them to continue to participate as we put up surveys and things, because it does matter. This committee is not the decision maker of all things. We want to get community input and make sure that we're doing responsible design.
There might be an opportunity in the near future to invite one of the local papers to, if they want to interview and write a story, and we can incorporate some of that and get it out in the paper a little bit, maybe a rendering or two with the big draft note, not to be finalized. But just something I think that's another avenue we have to hit, using the papers to get more information out.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly we've had a couple articles so far, but I think reaching back out to them.
Chip gives a great interview.
Yeah. So, and at the appropriate time, I'll point to Phil again, but if there's things that we want to share, you think that are more appropriate at the time, we can get those.
Maybe right around the time of stage 2 submission, hey, stage 2 is out, this is what preliminary design would look like, this is where we are in the process. Because that's going to be June, and then we're thinking July, August, September, boom, bond vote right after that. So
comes quick. All right. Anything on that topic? Questions, concerns, comments? All right, move on. Stage 2 report tasks, including upcoming critical tasks. So we had said that the survey's done. I heard that the structural engineer has been out there. Is it McGrath that was out there from Pretzer? Yeah.
Lead it on Tuesday.
Can you just, if you wouldn't mind stepping up, just give us an update on where you're at with the stage 2 in general and any other things that are upcoming for testing?
So the stage 2 submission requires a number of activities be completed, structural assessments of all the existing schools, obviously the surveys we need at the new construction sites. That also will be including soil borings. So lessons learned, we should make sure that we alert abutters that they may see rigs out there drilling holes in the town property. But it may be alarming that they think something bigger is happening. But really, all we're doing is just trying to get the composition of the soil for structural and site civil estimating. That's all. Other than that, any information we need from the district, we usually reach out to either Brian or Chip, and they respond accordingly. So we're assembling that documentation now. And it will continue all the way up to submission.
So you have structural, soil, geotechnical, land survey. We've already done wetland flagging. What else do we have? Any other sub-consultants?
We will have sub-consultants in the development of our drawings, but they won't have to have any interaction out here on site.
So we'll talk about the notification regarding the borings. I mean, we have it on our GIS, you know, we can draw a circle and get the addresses within a certain radius and send out a notification. So, you know, whenever you get that scheduled, because there'll definitely be questions. We
Yeah.
can throw it up on social media too. Yeah, because anybody driving by is going to think we're building a new high school there right now. So, all right.
All right, thank you.
All right, Phil, before you leave, is there any other critical things that you need for the stage 2? Like anything that's going to hold you up? We approve of the cost estimating. That's a big key component, but is there anything that we need to do to keep you rolling?
No, I think it would probably be good, and we should revisit your schedule to see if we have the actual dates identified for 3 things that need to happen. The school building committee will need to make a recommendation to submit the stage 2 to the school committee. And the school committee will have to take action and vote to submit. And then the town council will also have to take action and vote to submit. We want to be very clear, and depending upon what the expectation is of these 8 of the bodies, that it is very, very unlikely that we are able to produce a final document weeks in advance of the submission. It just doesn't happen. What we have found that has satisfied the bodies that are voting to approve is that we provide them section 1, which is called the project summary and prioritization. That has all the information in there. It has the cost, it has the schedule, it has the project description, which is really what the stage 2 is. So we'll want to work backwards because your bodies may want that information a week in advance, and you know, and then this body has to vote, recommend it first, and by the time you do it, you find out that you need this information in 4 weeks, which is just, challenging, that's all.
So we did put it on the schedule, like we backed up. That is on the master schedule, all the approvals, and I aligned those with the council dates, so we'll look at them, make sure they still align. But the one recommendation I would have is, it's a very large document. I don't expect any of the bodies to be able to get to the level of granular. My hope is to have the OPM on board, and that OPM will help us also issue a recommendation, but maybe a brief, like an executive pager, is like, here's the ride requirements, and we've checked them off, and basically, like a budget and brief, just a high level.
Well, I agree with that. Members of our current bodies and members of our current community in the past have looked to and read through every page of stage 1 and stage 2. And I'm agreeing we should have the summary, and that's what we should be presenting, but I also would highly recommend having whatever available is made public, and if people want to go in and dig in, they will. They will.
That's fine, I'm not
Just
saying
making
don't.
it available.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying, and it makes sense. It's logical. But we also need to make sure that whatever is there is available in some capacity, because they will absolutely go in and dig. No, right or wrong, or indifferent, it's there.
Just, as we get the flow of the drafts, and we can label them 50%, 75%, whatever you can get us, and we can post it. I've been posting all the documents for every meeting. We'll just post them along, just like we have. So If people want to go in and review it, they can. So, and you're right, it wasn't to say don't do the full document, it's to say, for the benefit of those who just don't have a time compressed, you know, a brief summary is great. So, yeah. All right, any other comments on that? All right, thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
And I know you're doing a lot of work for the stage too, so a couple months will come quick. All right, we'll move on to general public comment this time. Does anybody have any? We got a few people left. Doral? Oh, you have one? Why don't you come on up and then, if you could just come on up to the mic, just so for the benefit of anybody watching. If you could just state your name.
Yeah, Mike Gagas. I'm with the Economic Development Committee here in town as well. I'm coming up my first year completion. We had a little conversation about the school building at our last meeting at the first of the month, and I suggested we put it on the agenda for the next meeting because I think you could use as many avenues to communicate and as many people on board with the project as possible. Just when watching the presentation tonight, a few bike racks in the picture would be a good thing to do. We have a bike committee here. You know, there are a lot of people that have a lot of different interests and care about the town a lot. And I think you want everybody thinking about this project. And I'm going to suggest that we invite you to our meeting to come and do that. I don't want to put more work on you, but I do think there's a way that you can amplify your messaging and consider enlisting others, you know, in the town to help with the communication.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Absolutely.
Would it be beneficial to reach out to all the board chairs and have more of a group roundtable
That's a better idea. Absolutely.
to just, instead of going to each individual board and communicating this information, and everyone's in the room and can cross-talk and ask questions? Would that be
I think that's a really good
we could
idea.
set that up maybe at the cafeteria or at the high school. Should be a more appropriate venue for that, and I think that would maybe work.
That'd be great.
What's the committee think of that? Yeah? All right. So why don't we work on setting that up soon to give everyone a kind of a snapshot and get some comments early.
All right, super. All right, thank you.
Perfect. Doral, did you have the? Yeah, we'll do, we'll hold it to 5 minutes on the comments. Sorry, I meant to say that earlier.
All right, so I'm going back to my my comments on previous meetings. When you set the bond number at 125, I don't think Mr. Conti can predict what's going to happen in the next 4 years as this thing goes through, and whether or not inflationary pressures will come down, whether getting construction companies, you know, if they're freed up more so maybe their costs come down a little bit or not. But right now, what we're in right now is not probably the worst time possible to do this project. But you know, we have to do it now. And when the Department of Education is giving us 50 cents in the dollar, I still don't understand why we didn't go for 150, because the differential between what the increase in the cost to the taxpayer for that additional $25 million, to me, it just didn't make any sense not to go for the 150. Now, I hope you read this when you get home tonight, because it's pretty bleak. You know, they designed this school, high school, and they found before, what you're looking at there, that picture, that's as far as they got when they had to stop the project because they had to go back to make sure they could get enough money to finish it. And they're still going to be, they're still going to have to take things out of the building that they wanted to put in it. Now this whole thing started in 2017 when I thought my two grandsons would be in this building. Even my eighth grader will never set foot in this high school. Okay, that's how badly that this whole thing has been going on. So, you know, it crashed and burned the first time. We obviously are not going to do that this time, but I would hate to see it where we build, where you have this design that you want to, for this wonderful place, and I actually loved it. I'm not happy where it is, but I loved it, okay? I really did. Phil, I'm serious, I loved it, okay? But you don't want to have to start taking things out before it's built. I mean, you know, I don't know if you can recall the 125 and make it the 135 or something, because you said you're still going to need maybe some money to you know, at least fix up the hazard for the people to move there from the admin building. See, there's one other thing. Brain's fried.
Thanks, Donald. And just to note, we're advisory, right? So we advised a number of categories of funding, including 150. And, you know, the 125 was approved to move forward, so that's what we have to roll with. With that, I believe we're at the end here. The scheduling next meeting, so I believe we had on the schedule for next week, correct? I don't have my schedule up. But Phil, where are you going to be in your process? Obviously, you have your designs. You're going to be going to cost estimating. Okay. Do you think you'd have something for Curtis Corner next week? Be able to get that? Not helping me. Well, we need to make decisions there, correct? We want to move that to cost estimating. Would that help you to get it there, or is that too quick? Would you rather? Is that good? All right. No, I think we just want to be able to look at what he's going to send forth, because we don't want to come in after he's estimating and go, oh, that wasn't what we were thinking. So I do think we need to have eyes on. Yeah, I mean, we can put that as very few topics and roll. All right, so we'll plan on next week.
I remember with the second comment, this is actually more important.
I'm giving you,
Okay.
I'll give you 2 minutes, because we do have to.
I don't need any more than that.
All right.
When the cost estimation is done, I'm hoping it's going to be done for a net zero school. And the reason I say that is for two reasons. Number one is, here we are, a coastal community. Global warming is going to affect this town big time as this century goes on. To build a new high school, to build this building, the biggest building, you know, that we'll build in this century, in this town, to build it and not have it to be as green as possible is a mistake. It's a mistake ecologically, and it's a mistake, I think, also monetarily, because over time you're going to recoup the monies that you may spend in the beginning to make the building like that. You'll recoup over time without question. Now, On the RIDE website, when you go to School Building Authority, it actually shows there a link, direct link to green schools. I sent you the information at least 2 or 3 times. There's schools, high schools in Massachusetts right now being built with geothermal heating and cooling. They put the well fields under the fields, like the 2 fields that are in where the 2 fields you're going to create on Columbia Street that's going to reproduce the hazard field. The well fields go underneath those fields, would go underneath the fields, and they're not seen. They're just in underground. And so I'm hoping, I hope you're going to direct Studio Jade to come up with numbers for a green school and then see how much green you can put into the school and to see what the cost differentials are and to see what the cost savings over time is. And I think if you're going to considering doing geothermal, you should have, I think those other projects did test wells like you would do your test wells now to see whether or not it's feasible.
All right. Thanks, Dorald. I actually think you make a fair point, but I don't want to get it into, it's coming late in the evening, and I don't want to get into it now. I know Phil and I have discussed this, some of the challenges and some of the, so let's do this. I'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting, to discussion of incorporation of green design and how we approach that from a cost estimating aspect. Fair enough? All right. All right, I'll get a motion to adjourn.
Before we do that, what time is the meeting next week?
Oh,
So I have it's the 27th.
5 o'clock.
5
I was gonna
o'clock
say
was our
5
standard meeting time.
And say 5 to 6?
And aren't we required, because we didn't get the, in order to get to the full 52.5%, aren't we required to have certain green initiatives?
We're starting to have a certain energy, like follow certain
Right.
New
There is
England energy,
some that are already built in that we have.
but not to the level of geothermal and others. So-
Understood, but I'm saying we can't, in order for us to get the full 52.5, because we didn't get it from the, when we took another look at Wakefield and CCMS with the index, thank you, that we are required to do some of this, so it is certainly worth looking into.
We are, and there's a balance there, and I think that's a larger discussion we can have next week. All right, good stuff. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Dave, thank
Second.
you. Thank you, Chip. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Have a good evening.